Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist worldwide.
This show took a while to prepare for because there are so many conspiracy theories out there. And I think if you're going to address these very real issues, you need to be prepared. So, brought my tinfoil for the hat. So, see if I can get it into my head shape. I have kind of a large cranium, Get it up there. Keep those negative vibes or neg vibes out. Keep any of the, alien transmissions from coming in. You just never know what's emitting out there, people. You just don't know. You got to make sure you're prepared because there's a lot going on this planet that just doesn't pass muster when you compare it to the official story. The attack of September 11th, 2001, obviously an inside job. Princess Diana's death, secretly orchestrated by the royal family. Didn't you know that? Osama bin Laden's body was never actually buried at sea. John F. Kennedy, he wasn't killed by a lone gunman. He was killed by the mob, the mafia. Digital television is spying on you in your own living room. They have monitoring devices in those little digital receivers. Alternative medicines are being suppressed by the big pharmaceutical companies. Somebody's actually invented a car that runs on water. It runs on tap water. But the big oil companies, they'll never let you know about it. Paul McCartney, legendary lead singer of the Beatles, was actually killed in a car crash in 1966 and replaced with a double. John Lennon was actually assassinated by the CIA for having too much political influence. He was a fly in the ointment. He had to go. The fluoride in your water, your drinking water, your tap water, it's part of an Illuminati plot to take over the world. A flying saucer crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, and since that time, the United States government has conspired with extraterrestrials. Conspired with them. They are in league with them, allowing the abduction of its citizens in exchange for secrets about their advanced technology. President Roosevelt had advanced knowledge of Pearl Harbor. He allowed it to happen so he could then go and convince America's politicians and population to go to war against Hitler. By the way, Adolf Hitler never committed suicide. He lived in secret. He lived on for decades. Jesus actually married Mary Magdalene and fathered several children whose descendants ultimately became the Merovingian dynasty. There was a Jewish plan to dominate global banking and the media, ultimately achieving world domination in a document known as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Legendary rock bands have placed subliminal backward messages in their songs, messages that pledged their allegiance to Satan. The Apollo 11 moon landing was a staged fabrication. Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC, is actually run by the KKK. And their chicken recipe contains ingredients that sterilize black men. The AIDS virus was created in a laboratory as a form of population control. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami was part of a joint nuclear experiment perpetrated by Israel and the United States to exterminate nations with heavy Muslim populations. Chemtrails from jet planes passing overhead, those aren't ice crystals and water vapor, no. Their biological agents sprayed every day, all day, without explanation upon an assuming population by its own government. In October of 1943, a naval experiment in Philadelphia went horribly wrong, transporting the U.S. Navy destroyer Eldridge through space and time, only to have Navy officials deny the event long after it happened. William Shakespeare never actually wrote the works of Shakespeare. And finally, Elvis Presley, he didn't die in 1977. Today, he's working behind the register at a Burger King in Chicago. We're talking about conspiracy theories. And who better to address those than Michael Shermer of Skeptic Magazine? I'm going to check in with him a little later on this hour. He has seen more and spoken more and written more about conspiracies, some true, some bogus, how the brain works, how to avoid the false and embrace the true, when to be skeptical and when you're just trying too hard, and a whole lot more. We'll do that here a little later on during the show. But I will start with the phones and go to 801. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth, this is Michael again, same as last week.
Well, you're kicking us off, Michael. What do you have for us?
Well, you mentioned the Illuminati. I want to say great intro, first of all.
Thank you.
That was a really good one.
Thank you.
The Illuminati conspiracy theory. Have you heard of, like, how they say all the rappers and musicians are involved in it?
Well, I don't know that I've heard musicians. When I hear about the Illuminati, it's more about the media and banking. What have you heard?
Well, okay, you can, like, if you look it up on the internet, first thing that's going to come up is the rapper Jay-Z. People are like, the Illuminati is run by famous politicians and musicians, rappers, and they're planning to take over the world and their secret society. First of all, Illuminati's been gone since like the 1400s when they were wiped out. So that's not true. And if they were so secret, if they're so secret, why would everyone know about them on the internet?
I won't look at Jay-Z the same way again, probably. But
He's a soldier of Satan.
Well, you never know. Hey, you never know about these things. You've got to be skeptical. You've got to keep your eyes and ears open. We're going to talk more about the Illuminati here during this show. I'm glad you brought him up, so we'll dig a little bit deeper. But thanks for kicking us off today, and we'll keep our eyes and ears on Jay-Z moving forward, okay?
All right. Thanks,
all right, take care of yourself. I've got a 000, probably a Skype call on my switchboard. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist Radio podcast. Who is this?
Hi, it's a pleasure to speak to you. My name's Christian from Pennsylvania.
Christian, appreciate you calling in. Let's talk about conspiracies. What's your take?
All right, great. First, I want to thank you for your podcast. It's amazing, and I listen to it all the time, almost religiously.
Well, I'll keep doing them as long as people listen and enjoy them. So it's very kind of you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I wanted to bring a different perspective into this and not single out a single conspiracy theory, but being a psychology student, I question people's motivations. And for one thing, I know a lot of people that very often investigating conspiracy theories, especially posting about them on Facebook kind of ad nauseum, even for atheists and non-believers, can become almost a religion for them. And it seems to me that, some people I've encountered replace, when they become an atheist or lose their faith, it slowly gets replaced with conspiracy theory. So that's my first point. My second point is the amount of psychological trauma that especially I think the 9/11 conspiracy theories cause. Because first of all, it was traumatic enough that the event happened, right? And I think that, even if what people are saying is true, first of all, what can you do about it? And, second of all, I think that, reliving this trauma over and over again, keeping it in the news, keeps people afraid, quite frankly, and, kind of re-traumatizes you. Now, I think that for some people, they get kind of a thrill out of this. Like, it's, I know it sounds odd to say, but being traumatized or afraid can almost be a drug for some people.
It's almost like Munchausen by proxy, where people raise the alarm bell and then gain sympathy or at least attention from, and I think there's an aversion to what they call groupthink. If the majority goes right, even if they are correct, this person will turn left. If the majority goes down, they will go up. They'll never follow the crowd, and then they will congratulate themselves for being an individual, for not being part of the herd. And part of me understands that, but at the same time, if everyone understands that the evidence adds up, 2 + 2 = 4, you probably should actually turn right there. You should probably go with the rest of the group who are embracing the evidence. It's
exactly, and I'm fine with rational evidence. But as you said, I think that people can be doing these things just to be, oppositional or contrary to popular belief, or just do it to, like you said, like a Munchausen by proxy thing, just to kind of get a rise out of people. And I think maybe even it feels some people feel secure in a way that they're, making other people feel like, they're unsure of themselves. Or, I've thought, too, that it could also be a way of getting back for, the majority for, their perceived injustices over, religion, the majority religion for a lot of time.
I think there are some people out there who hate George W. Bush so much, and I'm not a fan, people, but they hate the man so much. There's so much venom and vitriol that I think part of me thinks they want him to be responsible for this attack. I think they are looking for an opportunity to vilify the man even more. And when you look at the facts, it just doesn't wash. I'm glad you brought it up. We're going to talk about 9/11 here with Michael Shermer later on during the show and go a little deeper. But I appreciate the call. And honestly, you raised some very good points, something certainly worth exploring. Anything else?
No, that's it. And I thank you very much for letting me call in. I appreciate your show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the allegations for 9/11. There are a couple of films out that assert that the attacks of September 11th, 2001 were not a terrorist attack from outside, but were an inside job. Controlled demolition. And these people are convinced that we haven't gotten the full story. There's a website called Let's Roll 9/11 that says that United Airlines Flight 175 that hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center had an object underneath the fuselage of the right wing that is normally not part of the plane. They say it's a missile or a bomb. It's obviously part of an inside job attack. Of course, that turned out to be just a bulge where the landing gear on the craft, and it was enhanced by the angle of the sun in the photographs. I hear a lot that no kerosene fire or jet fuel can burn hot enough to melt steel. There's no way that it would have caused the towers to fall. Steel frame skyscrapers have never collapsed from fire, since they're built from steel that does not melt below 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. They say no fuel, not even jet fuel, burns hotter than 1,500 degrees. Well, it's true. I mean, you're not going to melt steel at 1,500, but it's not about melting. It's about compromising the structural integrity of the metal. And I'm reading here from the American Institute of Steel Construction, quote, steel loses about 50% of its strength at 1,100 degrees. At 1,800 degrees, it is probably less than 10%. Add in the combustible materials inside the buildings into the mix, the rugs, the curtains, the furniture, the paper, everything, and you have pockets of flame approaching 1,800 degrees. You don't have to melt it. You simply compromise its integrity. You weaken it. and the structure falls. They talk about pieces of dust, these puffs of dust being ejected from the sides of the buildings as the towers fell, signifying the presence of explosive devices all going off. It's a phenomenon called pancaking. It causes the collapsing floors to simply compress the air and debris out of the windows. It's a very explainable phenomenon. And then the 9/11 truthers say, well, how do you explain the collapse of Building 7? Wasn't struck by an airplane and collapsed 7 whole hours after the towers fell. Many of the people who talk about Building 7 say that this wouldn't have happened unless it was already prepared for demolition. Skeptic magazine addressed this. It said the planned demolition hypothesis fails to explain why collapse would begin at exactly the point where damage was inflicted to the building, since the conspirators would have had to been able to predict exactly where debris from the fallen north and south towers would strike Building 7. And while the makers of the documentary Loose Change comment that World Trade Center 7 fell straight down into a, quote, convenient pile, the truth is that the pile of debris was 12 stories high and 150 meters across, hardly the kind of convenient pile described by conspiracy theorists. There's also the problem that, even as the truthers admit, prepping a building for demolition takes tremendous amounts of time and effort. Usually the building targeted for demolition has been abandoned for considerable time and partially gutted to allow explosives intimate contact with the structure of the building. But the World Trade Center buildings were occupied right up to 9/11. How'd the government gain access to wire up 3 towers for complete demolition without anybody noticing? Sneaking wire and bombs into buildings while thousands of people are working in offices, riding the elevators, milling about in the halls. That scenario is unlikely in the extreme. They say there's no remains of Flight 77 at the crash site. That's simply absurd. Wreckage everywhere. Holes in the Pentagon too small to be left by a Boeing 757. The hole was only 75 feet wide. It's because the fuselage went through. One of the wings hit the ground, the other one was just sheared off. And yet, so many people believe that there's a grander, greater story, a more clandestine story behind 9/11. It was our fault. We wanted an excuse to go to war. And so we destroyed our own buildings and assassinated our own citizens by the thousands to make it happen. Conspiracy. Area code 918. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth. It's Manfred the Cranky Saint.
Manfred, glad to talk to you. I thought you were being deployed or something. Are you back in town or what?
Well, I haven't been deployed yet. Don't know if that's going to happen with the knee injury I took last year, so we're still waiting on word on that.
You're all banged up. Well, I'm glad you called anyway. What's your perspective on conspiracy theories?
Well, I used to be a 9/11 truther myself, and it was, now that I look back, I'm kind of embarrassed about it. I've still got some of the books floating around the house. I had to get rid of those one of these days. And I've still got a loose change bumper sticker on my car.
Well, tell me about some of the things you were asserting. Was it all, did you say, I don't know what happened, but I can't believe it was just Al-Qaeda, or were you going deeper? Did you make the Building 7 argument? Was it a George W. Bush thing? I mean, where were you going at it from?
My big one for me, it was mainly the Pentagon strike was the one that got me. Yeah, that was the one, the size of the hole, the supposed missile that was caught on video by a convenience store, things like that. That was the one that really caught me. And then Building 7 did make me scratch my head a little bit. I saw a couple of postings about one of W's brothers was in charge of security at the World Trade Center, and that's how they managed to get in to plant the explosives and things like that. That was my thing. I had gotten so far into it that I was handing out copies of Loose Change around the university here in town. I was, I wore my my truther shirt every day to class. I mean, it was pretty bad. What got me away from it was Alex Jones. That man, I started looking at his stuff. The guys who produced Loose Change appeared on his program a few times, and I started taking a look at his website. And that was a man who could believe a dozen different contradictory conspiracies at the same time and believe them wholeheartedly.
For those who don't know who Alex Jones is,
myself.
He's a talk radio host here in America. He's got a syndicated show called The Alex Jones Show. It's based in Texas, I think, and he's on across the country, and he is a hardcore right-wing conspiracy theorist. I put him up there with Art Bell, and part of me doesn't even want to put him with Art Bell because part of me thinks Art Bell doesn't believe a word of it. He's just a good businessman. But Alex Jones is, wow. Well, for you then, was it about the evidence or was it about the people who were associating themselves with the truther movement? Was it more like you didn't want to rub shoulders with those people, or what?
It is a bit of both. I really didn't want to be seen associating with these people, but also it became one of those unknowable things. I was like, I'm still not convinced we know everything.
Yeah.
But I also know we're never going to know, so I'm not going to worry about it.
Why do you think it's difficult for people to buy into the official story?
It's just too big. They can't believe that just a handful of people could. Well, I can't say that many people as a handful, but a relatively small group of people could pull off such a large operation. The idea is that they have to have had help from the inside.
Well, we'll explore that some more. I'm going to talk a little bit here about Loose Change, the movie. But Manfred, thanks for the call. I hope your knee gets better, and you call back anytime, okay?
All righty.
All right, take care of yourself.
All right.
Loose Change is a video that was created in, I want to say it was 2003. It's possibly the most popular 9/11 conspiracy video out there, and I think you can find it online. They created a recut of it in 2006, another cut of the film in 2007, and then another cut in 2009 called Loose Change 9/11, An American Coup. Originally, Loose Change made all these allegations. The hole in the Pentagon was too small to have been made from a plane. They actually showed some stuff incorrectly in the film. They show like the ground floor opening in a graphic, and they say this is the hole. Well, it was only part of it. And they showed the second floor opening there and said, well, this was the hole, but it was only part of it. Witnesses, rattled human beings out there just swearing they heard explosions in the buildings. Of course, obviously ignoring the whole concept of secondary explosions caused by anything, vaporized fuel or short circuits or what have you in the buildings. A lot of initial media footage. Remember the day of 9/11? And we'll move past 9/11 here in a few minutes, but it was chaos. Hell, I was on the air at Clear Channel. We had 6 radio stations on Studio Row, and nobody knew anything. It was all speculation. It was all emotion. It was all, I can't believe this is happening. Well, they use a lot of that initial first day footage of people just speculating. They integrated into the film. Loose Change asserts that the passengers on United 93 couldn't have made cell phone calls from the plane, despite the fact that communications experts say, yeah, that is possible. And they also ignore the fact that half the calls made from the plane were made from those onboard air phones, not cell phones. Time magazine did a whole article on Loose Change in September of 2006. Apparently, the film was made by a couple of 20-something guys with some pizza money and a laptop. I don't know. I can't sit through the whole thing. It's difficult for me, And but if you want to, you can just Google it. Time Magazine does have a sort of a definitive final paragraph about conspiracy theories and why they won't go away. It's called Why the 9/11 Conspiracy Theories Won't Go Away by Lev Grossman, Sunday, September 3rd, 2006. The paragraph says this. It says, there are psychological explanations for why conspiracy theories are so seductive. Academics who study them argue that they meet a basic human need to have the magnitude of any given effect be balanced by the magnitude of the cause behind it. A world in which tiny causes can have huge consequences feels scary and unreliable. Therefore, a grand disaster like September the 11th needs a grand conspiracy behind it. Quote, we need to associate major events, a president or princess dying, with major causes, says Patrick Lehman, a lecturer in psychology at Royal Holloway University of London who's conducted studies on conspiracy belief. Quote, if we think big events like a president being assassinated can happen at the hands of a minor individual, that points to the unpredictability and randomness of life and unsettles us, unquote. In that sense, the idea that there is a malevolent controlling force orchestrating global events is, in a perverse way, comforting. Another challenge is zeitgeist, which asserts a lot of 9/11 things and also gets into some correlations between Christianity, the scriptures, and astronomy, and astrological symbols, rather. And, the things horribly sourced, filled with holes, and yet people, time and again, even on the Thinking Atheist Facebook page, say, you got to see Zeitgeist, the movie. It's so enlightening. Well, if you're going to watch Zeitgeist, and there have been some sequels to it, you're going to need to go through afterward, and you're going to need to address all of the inconsistencies and the either poorly sourced or absolutely unsourced assertions that Zeitgeist makes as a film. It is not a credible source for a lot of the information that you might be hoping to use in the debate arena. Area code 951, you're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who is this?
David Kudo, California, 17. I was going to talk about, I think Stephen Hawking said first. I wanted to say how I think that people tend to overvalue how powerful the government is in some of this stuff. And then on extraterrestrials, I think Stephen Hawking said something to the extent of, if the government is in on it, it's probably the best thing they're doing it right now.
Like this is the most effective and most efficient that they've ever been because they don't do anything else well at all. Well, I can buy into that. I don't have a problem with distrusting your government. Geez, I'm as skeptical as governments and the politicians inside those walls as anybody. But the idea that they can do something large and secretly and effectively for a long period of time, to me, just defies credibility.
I don't know. That's really interesting how you got the sourcing on some of the stuff. I haven't really looked into a lot of it, but that's pretty good what you've gotten so far, I think.
Well, thanks for the call and appreciate you listening. Take care of yourself, okay?
All right. See ya.
All right. Area code 704, you're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
This is Jasmine.
Jasmine, what's going on?
Not much.
Well, talk to me. What do you got for me on this conspiracy theory episode?
I know people on both sides of the sort of conspiracy thing. I have friends who really believe deeply in these conspiracies, and I knew someone who didn't even know what 9/11 was. So, I think the conspiracy, a lot of them are just plain foolish. I just laugh at a lot of them.
Do you think they're just paranoid people?
I think so. I'm no expert. I don't have a doctorate in anything like that, but really, the government snuck in big bombs and blew up 2 towers and killed thousands of people. Really?
Well, what about other stuff? Like, the rumor that the royal family was responsible for the death of Princess Di, and that chase through the tunnel, the paparazzi in tow, was all orchestrated so that they could just get rid of a pest. When you hear things like that, where does your mind go?
It's, I don't know whether to laugh or get angry at those people, because it's like she died and it was a tragedy, and to think that they would say the royal family was responsible for that, I just think that idea is just ludicrous.
Those people are out there, though. They put up websites.
I know, they're everywhere.
They hold press conferences. They're writing books.
Websites. They're on YouTube and everything.
You know, the internet is sort of a weird place. There's so much good information and then so much else.
So much, yeah, there is.
Well, Jasmine, you keep thinking out there, and your conspiracy theory buddies, just glad they've got a sort of an anchor of reason hanging in there, okay?
Okay.
All right, take care of yourself.
You too.
There's another huge conspiracy probably up there with the moon landing. They know that we faked the moon landing. I actually watched a Mythbusters episode where they examined the claims about the moon landing. You know, that hey, the flag was blowing. There's no oxygen up there. That's impossible. And the footprints were too clear in the sand, or in the moon dust. There's sand in the moon dust. There was no stars in the photographs on the horizon, the moon's horizon. All these different, you know. And of course, they went boom, boom, boom. The shadows are in strange places. It makes no sense. And so there are some people out there who are convinced that we never went to the moon, that we shot the whole thing in a studio somewhere and sold the world a lie. And I don't know what they have to say about all the subsequent Apollo missions to the moon. Well, we faked the first one and then we decided to go for real, or what? Or we faked them all? I don't know. But probably next to the moon landing conspiracy would be JFK. I remember when the Oliver Stone film came out, and this was it in the 90s, late 80s, probably early 90s. Now, when's the last time Oliver Stone made a good movie? And JFK was well made, I thought. And I'm kind of a movie buff. You know, but I mean, for me, there was Platoon, and there's been Wall Street and a few others. Most of his stuff is just, especially lately, wow, you know, wow. But I remember the first time I saw JFK, and I was pretty young. And I came away thinking, whoa, man, the Cubans, you know, and the mob and the Russians and the KGB and, you know, the Zapruder film. And why, well, was Oswald, did he act alone? How could one single gunman fire off 3 shots in 7 seconds with a moving target with an old school bolt action rifle? And why did people hear shots coming from the grassy knoll back there? And why was Oswald publicly assassinated by Ruby? That's so weird. Wasn't the Warren Commission just fiction? Wasn't that just theater for the public? Did the government threaten witnesses? What about the forensic examination of Kennedy's body, you know, that says that there's no way that bullet could have come from the 6th floor book depository window? It came from another direction. Were the CIA and the FBI involved in the cover-up? What about Castro and the Cuba connection? What about the Secret Service? Had they been compromised? Didn't look like they provided adequate protection on that fateful Dallas day. Why was he in an open, convertible vehicle around all those buildings? Was Lyndon B. Johnson at the head of a conspiracy to take the White House? I mean, you know, your mind is going 1,000 miles an hour. It's a well-constructed 3-hour film that is probably mostly fiction. And, you know, when it's on now, you know, they show it every once in a while when it's on now. I'll watch it. And if you look at it as just a piece of filmmaking, it's really it's great storytelling. But is it credible? You know, is it credible? The National Geographic Channel did a show last year that was fascinating, and I think you can find it on natgeotv.com or on YouTube. Look for it. It's called JFK, The Lost Bullets. And they reconstructed the shots from the book depository. You know, how did the magic bullet travel from here to here to here to here to here? This insane bullet that defies the laws of physics. It couldn't have happened, they said. Well, these guys actually conducted the experiments using the latest, greatest state-of-the-art technology. And they discovered that it is physically possible. It is the best explanation. And they concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald freaking shot Kennedy from the 6th floor window. Is it sexy? Not as much as the other stories. Now, we don't know what his motivation. We don't know so much about that story. And there are some weird, strange, crazy, but I'm talking about just the physical, forensic look at where did the bullets come from. And yet, no matter how much evidence, how much examination happened, there will be people who insist. Yeah, he was killed by the CIA. LBJ, he was waiting. He was waiting to take possession of the big chair, Were there other motivations that had to do with the Vietnam War? What about the Cuban Missile? I mean, all these things, was this retaliation for Cuba? All of these types of things. Conspiracies, they exist. And you know what? They exist on atheist pages. You'll find people on my page, on many atheist pages, who they distrust pretty much everything. And I don't know that I consider that a vice to a degree. And again, we'll ask Michael Shermer about that here in about 15, 20 minutes. Area code 914. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. What is your name?
Hi, this is Avi from New York.
I'm sorry, I missed your first name, sir.
Avi.
Avi. Man, I appreciate you. Thanks for calling the show. What do you think?
I appreciate your show. I like it a lot.
Thank you.
So you were talking a lot about 9/11. I thought I'd just bring up another conspiracy theory from that topic, which is that it was orchestrated by Israel or the Jews, and we know this for a fact because no Jews were killed in the Trade Centers.
Oh, on 9/11?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard that one.
Oh, yeah, I've heard it. It was one of many theories bandied about,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, and as someone who was brought up Jewish, I'm an atheist now, but who was brought up Jewish, I just thought it's very interesting because Jews specifically as a group were targeted a lot for conspiracy theories. I'm sure everyone knows, but so it's just funny, as a kid growing up and going to school, you kind of hear, and they think that we, kill Christian babies for blood for matzah, and they think that we run the world, and they think this and that. So you, I guess, automatically become very skeptical of conspiracy theorist claims.
There are many conspiracy theories floating around about the Jews. How they supposedly are part of a conspiracy, a global effort to control all media and to control the banking system and the banking cartels, to tie up the world's finances, to dominate the planet. Have you heard that before?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. We know they tell us in school when we're younger, be prepared because you're going to hear, you brought up the protocols of elders of Zion, all those types of things, which very much, as Christopher Hitchens said, very much appeal to pseudo-intellectuals and treasure hunters and all that, those types of people.
And I think it gives people an excuse to vilify people of the Jewish culture. Oh, geez, they're just trying to control the banks. And, come on, that's just lazy thinking. But I'm glad to hear it.
And as a Jew, you're always thinking, when did I miss all these meetings? Why wasn't I invited?
Where's my cut, people? Where's my percentage? I'm Jewish. How is it for you coming from a Jewish culture and being a non-believer? Is it weird?
It is a little bit weird, especially because Jews generally have a different approach to religion in general, or once you get inside the very Orthodox, the Bible is not taken literally. You kind of, take the chosen people moniker as it's kind of like wearing a captain's C. It doesn't really mean you're better than anyone else. It just means that you're supposed to be helping other people. So it's a little bit strange, but it's
probably hard to juggle that. I am part of God's chosen people, but it doesn't mean we're better than they are. We're just chosen. How do you?
Right. I mean, well, if you look at the three big monotheisms, Judaism is the only one where everyone goes to heaven. There is no hell. Everyone goes. Doesn't matter what you believe. If you're a good person, you get to heaven. It's just that Jews have taken upon themselves a different set of rules, but everyone can still end up at the same place.
Sign me up.
I know, right? It sounds great.
Thanks for a great call. We'll talk a little bit about the Illuminati and about Zion here, but thanks for the call and thanks for listening. I much appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. The Illuminati is a great conspiracy. It was a secret society in Bavaria, like in the late 18th century, and apparently they had like this political agenda, right? They wanted to abolish the monarchies, and they tried to sort of institute their agenda under the radar: secrecy, conspiracy, subterfuge, all that. They infiltrated other organizations. They thought they were enlightened, but they didn't have a whole lot of success, the Illuminati. And as I understand it, they were wiped out within 15, 20 years of their origins. They lasted a couple decades max. Well, conspiracy theorists think that the Illuminati cabal still exists, whether it's in its original form or it's been sort of mutated a little bit. Many believe that a large Jewish banking family or families have been orchestrating all around the planet these political revolutions in Europe and America ever since the 18th century. They think that they've been pulling the puppet strings. Their ultimate aim is to bring about a new world order. And it's like a one world government, in the Antichrist and whatnot. And this is sort of the end of days. They're helping to bring about the end times. The New England Skeptical Society had a paragraph on it. In the Skeptic's Dictionary, it said this. It said, in the paranoid mind, the Illuminati succeeded in their goals and have now infiltrated every government and every aspect of society. They are responsible for every evil and every unjust act that ever occurs anywhere. The fact that absolutely no evidence of their existence can be found only serves to make them stronger and more frightening. They are the demon in the closet and will probably never disappear from the paranoid fantasy world of right-wing conspiracy theorists. It's a little scary. A couple of quick bullets on them, by the way. The New World Order, a one-world government, hastening the coming of the Antichrist, and my favorite, messages from alien Illuminati reptilians, extraterrestrials, have been sending messages to the Illuminati for thousands of years, explaining such things as the Gregorian calendar. Just Google search Illuminati and reptilian and watch what comes up. It'll blow your mind. Area code 405. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. What's your name?
My name's Chris.
Chris, thanks for calling. Thanks for waiting. What's going on?
Yeah, I called in during the Halloween episode. Not much, just sitting back in the chat room reading some of the posts and kind of move away because my cell phone had to be charged up. But what do you take, or what do you think about the conspiracy theories behind the Oklahoma City bombing?
Well, I haven't heard a lot. I mean, I'm in Oklahoma. But
yeah, I know.
For us, there really weren't a lot of credible distractions other than, then McVeigh acted on his own, essentially.
There was a report that came out before his execution that there was actually a second bomber that helped him out, and the reason that he did it was, in fact, to start a religious, or not religious, but a race war, like Helter Skelter, the Manson murders, all that.
Well, he very well may have. Who knows? I mean, who knows what went on in that guy's mind? Now, for those who aren't maybe listening from another part of the planet, in 1995 in Oklahoma City, the Alfred Murrah Federal Building in downtown was blown up. Guy made a fertilizer bomb, put it in the back of, I think it was like a big moving truck or something. This big truck.
It was a Ryder truck.
Yeah, he parked it right in front of the building, and it was at that time the single greatest terrorist attack on our own soil, and it was perpetrated from within by a guy named Timothy McVeigh, who was just caught on a fluke. By the way, he was. I think he was driving without a license plate or something, and the cop pulled him over, and bam! I mean, one thing led to another.
according to interviews with him, he actually planned his capture. That's why he drove a old car with no license plate heading north to Kansas. And the reason why he did it was a response attack from Waco with the Branch Davidians and the ATF. And he got the idea from reading a white supremacist book called The Turner Diaries. I remember watching a documentary on the History Channel a long time ago, and they had like reenactments of it and stuff like that.
Well, I actually had heard, and I believe that's the accepted story. It was the Waco incident with the Branch Davidians and the death of 80 plus people there as the ATF went over and all that thing spilled over and all those children died, and that spurred him on to then wreak havoc, to take his sort of vengeance on the government.
Yeah. The reason I brought this up is you were talking about conspiracy theories, and when I was working at a local hardware store, I was always talking to this older gentleman who was devoutly Christian. He believed the Bible literally, and he believed that the attack on the murder building was actually a government attack. And the thing I don't understand is when people think it's a government attack, how can they orchestrate it when they can't even get the mail right?
Dude, like, don't even get me started.
Honestly,
don't even get me started.
Honestly, like, you send a letter, you don't get it until like 3 months later, and it's like the house next door. Also, I heard that, the government was involved, and the people that were on the planes and stuff like that, they were on the planes, that the government's taking care of them and all that. I'm just thinking the logistics behind it all it's stupid.
Oh, you're talking about
like the
9/11.
idea that 9/11 and just basically any conspiracy, like the government was involved with any conspiracy attacks, just the logistics behind it makes no sense.
Well, whether you agree with this politics or not, I don't believe for a second George W. Bush would have endorsed the execution, assassination, what have you, of 3,000 people so he could have an excuse to go to war with Saddam Hussein. And I mean, that's just bullshit. It's not even close to credible. For Pete's sake, there's enough legitimate stuff out there to be critical about. This is a huge overstay, a huge distraction. Come on, people, you're killing me. Thanks for a great call, and thanks for listening. Anything else?
That's it. Pretty much. I lost my words, but
I do that all the time, dude, and it'll happen more and more as you get older. You'll walk into the room and you'll go, "Where are my keys?" So just get ready. Well, I appreciate you being a part of the show. You're my prelude to Michael Shermer, so you're kind of his warm-up act. So good job. Thanks for calling. All right. Thanks. Take it easy. Michael Shermer, I've had him on the show before, and I really do like the guy because he is an expert on conspiracies and pseudoscience and bogus thinking, and he is on the front lines all around the planet, going out and seeing these wild, crazy claims, whether they're religious or what have you, and putting them up against the microscope, and then essentially, seeing if they pass the science test, the reason test. He's the founding publisher of Skeptic magazine. He's the executive director of the Skeptics Society. He has a monthly column for the Scientific American. He's host of the Skeptics Distinguished Science Lecture Series over at Caltech, and he has published a number of books. Michael Shermer, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
When I think of conspiracies and I think of skeptics, I obviously think of you and Skeptic Magazine. You do this for a living. I mean, is that accurate to say you guys go out and debunk all the bunk that's out there?
Yep, that's us.
And I don't want to say you've seen it all, but you've seen it all, haven't you? Haven't you seen it all?
Yep, just about, I would say, or at least heard it all.
I see on an Atheist page that I run, quite often several themes keep coming up. And I know you've spoken to them or about them on several occasions. So I'm just going to throw these out and let's just see where that takes us. I have to start with zeitgeist. And the loose change thing.
Yep.
I'm hearing a lot of the 9/11 truthers come out knowing that we're doing a show about conspiracy, and they automatically distrust anything that their governments tell them, right? They're like, you automatically assume, just like you assumed from your pastors that God was real, you automatically assume from your governments and the mainstream media that this story is real. You're just being religious. You're not being skeptical enough. So if someone says 9/11 was an inside job because I saw loose change or zeitgeist or what have you, how do you respond to that, Michael?
Basically, I start by asking, what's the source of the claim? And what's the basis of their claim? What's their evidence? Loose change and the whole 9/11 truthers, they seem to have this general conspiratorial mindset that no matter what you answer or reply to their claims, they're not going to believe it. Short of everybody and their brother was in on it, and it's a government coup, and there's a revolution afoot, that sort of thing. And so that tells me they're not really playing by the rules of science. And I usually, like I ask with anybody, how do you know that? When they go, well, we think the World Trade Center buildings were brought down by explosive device. How do you know that? Well, you saw those puffs of smoke. The puffs of smoke were caused by the floors collapsing, compressing the air that was smoky from the fires. And if they reply appropriately, which is because that's what it was, and that's what every fire person says it was, okay, then we're making progress. But they never do. They just say, nope, that can't be it. It has to be an explosive device. Why does it have to be an explosive device? Because that's what we want to be true. And so I usually just whittle away using the facts and then try to get at their deeper motives. What is it that they're really after? What's bugging them? They're skeptical of the government. Well, I'm skeptical of the government. And, lots of people are. We should be. That's a good thing. But, skepticism can go too far. It can verge into conspiratorial paranoia, in which case that's not helpful.
Are there certain types of people or are certain people's brains wired a certain way so that they tend to be more conspiracy-minded? Do you see any patterns? Or what causes people to be so skeptical that they stop trusting everything?
Yeah, I just wrote one of my Scientific American columns on this, on conspiratorial contradictions. And there's a study by a British psychologist that showed if you believe that Princess Di was murdered, you're also more likely to believe she faked her death and is still alive somewhere. Well, they can't both be true. But it turns out that people of a mindset that tend to believe anything that steers even slightly from the mainstream are likely to believe anything that steers from the mainstream, even when they contradict each other, just like that. And 9/11 is the same way. We all saw the planes hit, and we all saw that the buildings collapsed at the point at which the planes hit. So for sure, the planes had something to do with the impact. To believe that, and that some set of Bush administration operatives planted explosive devices inside the World Trade Center buildings at just the right floors, knowing ahead of time where the planes were going to hit precisely, and so on and so forth. That just verges from skepticism into insanity.
I was reading through some articles on Skeptic magazine, and I saw a quote from you, and you can check and make sure that it's something you actually said. But it reads, quote, I once asked G. Gordon Liddy, who should know about conspiracy theories. He said 3 people can keep a secret as long as 2 of them are dead. To think that thousands of people would keep their mouths shut is too ridiculous to consider.
Yep, that's
Is
right.
that accurate?
Yeah.
So the idea that thousands of people could all be in on it and nobody leaks doesn't seem to bother those who believe that it was an inside job. They buy the fact that the most supposedly, allegedly, the most inept administration in the history of the country has managed to keep a rap on this. It's really a contradiction.
It is, and that's one of the characteristics to distinguish between a true and false conspiracy theory. I mean, we have to be careful here because some conspiracy theories turn out to be true. There was an actual conspiracy to assassinate President Lincoln, for example, and we knew about it within hours. Pearl Harbor was a conspiracy by the Japanese. Watergate was a conspiracy by the Nixon administration. So these things do happen. The question is, what's the difference between those and, the 1,000 other conspiracy theories that have no basis in fact? And, well, one of them is that the more people that have to be involved, the less likely it is to be true, for two reasons. One, the leakage problem. People can't keep their mouth shut, and we'll find out about it. And two, the incompetency problem. It's just the more elements and components you have involved that have to go just right, that every person has to be at the right place at the right time and do the right thing. And so in my book, The Believing Brain, in my chapter on conspiracies, I have that story about the assassination of Franz Ferdinand that triggered the First World War by these Serbian nationalists who really did conspire. I mean, there was a half a dozen of them, and they each, met in secret to plot it, and then they had to pick up their weapons the night before at designated places with secret code words, and so on and so forth. And one by one, each of them failed. The gun didn't go off. The explosive device blew up too late or too early. One guy chickened out. The other guy missed. And, the whole thing was a flop until the motorcade happened to come back on the same route, and one of the assassins was just sitting there despondent on the curb, having failed, and there was his target right there in front of him, and he shot him dead. And that's more typical of how conspiracies go. People bumble and fumble their way through, and that really is how history unfolds. Not in a pre-planned perfect way, but more haphazardly.
Talking here with Michael Shermer. You bring up a great point, and to be fair, when I say conspiracy theorist, I'm usually speaking in a derogatory way. I'm thinking, you think we faked the moon landing? Oh, that's great. Paul McCartney hasn't been singing for the Beatles since 1966. Oh, that's great. I tend to go that way, but you bring up a very valid point that many times when a conspiracy theory is in place, at least it needs to be examined.
Yeah, that's right. What's the evidence and so forth. There was, after Pearl Harbor, there was a inquiry into whether or not Roosevelt might have known about the attack ahead of time and let it happen, or orchestrated it himself or whatever. And those inquiries never got anywhere because there was just never any evidence for it. And yet they make mistakes of logic. For example, there was after the fact, this is the hindsight bias, there were memos that were gathered by U.S. intelligence that the Japanese might attack Pearl Harbor. So why didn't the military do something about that? And this was months before. Well, in hindsight, you can pick out the memos that do seem to fit what actually happened. But at the time, there were thousands of memos of intelligence, pieces of intelligence that indicated the Japanese would attack here, there, and everywhere. And they weren't necessarily reliable. Same thing with that August 9th memo from Condoleezza Rice to Bush that, Osama bin Laden will attack on U.S. soil. After it happens, then everybody points to that particular piece of intel that everybody should have acted on. But it was just one of thousands of pieces of intel that the Secret Service, that the CIA gathers. And you don't know until after it happens which one fits. But then after the fact, the brain kicks in and reconstructs a plausible series of events that unfolded in some predictable way, but it wasn't predictable.
When I was growing up, it was always someone invented a car that runs on tap water. But the big oil companies have sequestered this entrepreneur. They've squashed him. His invention will never see the light of day. Big oil will make sure this invention. I always heard those types of things. But now it seems like in the age of the internet, there's a conspiracy everywhere. It's not just the information age. It's really also the misinformation age. You must have your hands full.
Yeah, I've followed those. I remember when I was in college. I remember the 100-mile-per-gallon carburetor that was being kept under wraps because the oil companies were in cahoots with the car companies and so on. And then, when I actually met people in the automobile industry, and of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Imagine how much money they could make by developing the very first car that got 100 miles per gallon. Think how many cars they could sell. And, they don't care about ExxonMobil or Chevron. What do they care about them? Those are different companies. And Chevron and ExxonMobil, they would just have to, re-gear and retool for other energy products, which they are. So, these things, and no one ever turns up any solid evidence for it. It's only rumor and innuendo.
I hear something similar about the pharmaceutical companies. You know, the allegation that they've cured something like cancer. But it's actually more profitable to keep everyone sick, and so they're in cahoots to make sure that everyone is ill so that they can continue to provide the cure. My thinking is, if they had a cure for cancer, wouldn't they put that on every billboard in every city on the planet? I mean, the best marketing that not even money could buy would be, we freaking cured cancer, Yeah,
and they would make a ton of money. Cancer is prevalent. It's everywhere. And the older we live, the longer we live, the more we get cancer. So, those companies would love to find a cure for cancer, even more than a cure for erectile dysfunction.
Well, that's a big one. As I get older, that's a big one. How can somebody, is there a process? I know you've got the baloney detection kit. Is that a good place to start? If someone was thinking, well, how skeptical should I be? I don't want to roll over. I don't want to accept everything that's told to me, even if it's everywhere in the mainstream media or what have you. But how do I myself go through a process of vetting this information? Is there a process that you recommend?
There is,
website?
yes. You mentioned skeptic.com. We just launched our Skepticism 101 program, which includes the baloney detection kit, but we're expanding that to including a whole set of teaching tools, lectures, PowerPoint presentations, articles, projects, magic tricks, illusions, things you can do with students, things that are educational, videos, and so on, all on what to do about weird beliefs and why people believe them and how to dispel, and so on. So skeptic.com, and you'll see right on the homepage there the Skepticism 101 program, and that's definitely the way to go.
You mentioned young people real fast. Do you think that the generation that is in high school now and college now are more critical, more skeptical than, say, those 20 years ago? Is that an overstatement?
It's hard to say because the poll measures show that Americans believe in roughly the same percentages as they did 30 years ago in God, in the devil, in creationism, in astrology, UFOs, psychics, and so on. The percentages haven't really changed much. They go up and down just a little bit, but they're pretty much consistently like a third to a half to two-thirds, depending on the particular claim that Americans tend to believe. So it's disturbing, to be sure, that in an age of science that so many people believe this stuff. I call it logic tight compartments. They're happy to use their iPhones and they think science is cool and NASA sending unmanned spacecraft to Mars. Wow, how cool is that? On the other hand, they think, some psychic on TV who talks to the dead must be real. So people just are not thinking. They're thinking critically in some areas, but not others. So one of the goals of the Skeptics movement, Skeptic Magazine, is to just get that information out there, that there's actual explanations for these particular claims. Because if you don't know them, what the actual explanations are, the default position is just go to whatever claim, whatever goofy idea you can think of. I had a teacher write me the other day, one of my daughter's teachers from years ago. He was a skeptic. They always start like that. I'm a skeptic too. However, I saw this guy bending spoons, and it was unbelievable. Bending spoons and forks. Now, look, I know it's not psychic. I know that Uri Geller guy was a phony. I know it's not psychic, but maybe he's got like this special metal with mercury in it. Now, the mercury would be toxic, though, so maybe he's got an amalgam special mercury mix, and he's just going on and on. So I watched this video, and it was just clearly a magic trick. I could see how he was doing it because I know how it's done. So I kind of gave him a few hints about how it was being done, not with magic metal, but with just plain old sleight of hand and the way it's presented, and you rotate it in a certain way and you show it, you reveal it in a certain way in your palm and so on. And it looks like it's bending, but it's already bent. And all I got back was, oh, thank you.
Well, it's kind of a letdown, isn't it? I mean, you've demystified the whole thing.
It is, yeah. And same thing happened I was on a Scientific American cruise last year, so these are all presumably pretty pro-science people, and dinner every night on the cruise ship. And so one guy was regaling us with tales about another spoon bender he had seen, but he had bent it in a way that he had never seen before, and I could tell by the way he was describing it that it was this different trick that I know. So as he was describing this, I pulled the spoon from the front of me right down into my lap. I bent it underneath the table and then pulled it back up, and he was still telling the story. And when he paused, I said, "Did it look anything like this?" And I proceeded to do exactly what the guy described and went, "Oh, shoot." Except he didn't say shoot.
You may not want to try to convince the guy guy who works over at Skeptic Magazine about, about the bending Skepticism 101, the Skeptical Studies Curriculum Resource Center on the website at skeptic.com. I'm not kissing your ass, I promise, but I love your lectures. I love your debates. I love the fact that you're so comfortable out there on stage. There's no pretense about you. Just go up and do what you do and debunk and have a lot of fun doing it. And you seem to engage with people. And it's a real honor for me to have you on the show, even for just a few minutes to talk about this stuff. So thanks for sparing a few precious minutes of your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you for your work. It's great.
Michael Shermer of Skeptic.com. I had an email from Andy, and Andy brought to my attention a conspiracy that I had not heard about before. Did you know that the logo for the 2012 Olympics carries a secret message? Andy's letter said, there are people out there, unfortunately a lot of them, who believe that the logo of the 2012 Olympics is intended to spell out Zion. If you twist and turn the elements of the logo a little, according to the believers of this conspiracy theory, the Zionist Illuminati will come out of the closet in 2012 in order to openly enslave the world as part of a new world order. And the 2012 Olympics logo will be the symbol for their power. Well, he gave me a link to a video that explains this. And I won't play more than just about 60 seconds. I think it's about 80 seconds long. And I want you to hang with me because I want you to hear the words of the poster. This was on YouTube posted by a user called 829Speedy. Regarding the Olympic logo for 2012.
If you want to know the identity of the men who rule the world from the shadows, all you have to do is unscramble the puzzle pieces of the 2012 Olympic Games logo. Yes, many have commented that it looks like a distorted swastika. But if you unscramble the 5 puzzle pieces, you will probably make the intended mistake of thinking the logo is the numbers 2012. Which is what you're supposed to think. But look again. The unscrambled logo spells the word Zion, and to make no mistake about it, the Zionist designer dotted the I. Let's be perfectly clear about the meaning of the word Zionist. It does not mean Jew. Zionists are both Christian and Jewish fanatics who believe God's chosen people have a God-given right to the land of Israel. Why was the word Zion chosen for the 2012 Olympic logo? Because the shadow government of Zionists will be coming out of the closet in 2012 to celebrate the fulfillment of the protocols of their learned elders. What are the protocols? The protocols are a revolutionary step formula to enslave the world in debt, subjugate the ignorant masses, and concentrate all of the world's power and wealth in Zionist hands under one world empire.
That's the general gist of the argument. I had to whittle that down just a little bit for brevity. And I have 2 words for the poster, 829Speedy. Pop filter for your microphone. Just a little handy, helpful sound tip for you there. 253, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What is your name?
Yes, this is Glenn, hopeful future planetary scientist.
What's going on, Glenn?
Well, with my major, I run into 2 conspiracies on a regular basis. Either when I'm debating with creationists or just talking with people at random, and I'll run into the moon landing conspiracy and, of course, the conspiracy of evolutionary biologists to hide the truth of creation.
I hear that one all the time. The entire scientific community, people who pride themselves on, many of whom who pride themselves on being smarter than everybody else in the room, are all in cahoots to sell the geologic column and the lie of evolution to the planet and to cover up the work of Jesus because they are in league with Lucifer. It is unbelievable.
Yeah, and one of the times when I was talking with a person who actually very full-heartedly believed that the moon landing was completely faked, I brought him into a meeting of the astronomy club at my dad's college where he teaches, and we did the whole experiment where we shot a laser at the moon and bounced it off of one of the mirrors that were purposely put there, and got the laser beam back to measure the exact distance to the moon, a little over 250,000 miles. And they still didn't believe that we had put anything up there, and they didn't believe that we could even get unmanned spacecraft up there.
Were these? I'm sorry. These are young people.
This point in time, it was a fellow high school student. This was about 5 years ago.
Well, what's that about? I mean, did they come from a religious culture? Were they kind of dim? Was there something else going on? I mean, did they not want to go along with the crowd? What do you think drives that?
Well, for this particular person, I do know that they were raised with religious background, but throughout my life, I have actually found that a lot of the people who buy into conspiracy theories in general usually also have a very pliable mindset where they can easily buy into what I like to call the greatest conspiracy of them all, which is organized religion. And I don't know if there's an actual correlation there, but I find it to be most common that those who buy into conspiracy theories also very much buy into a religion of one kind or another, whether it's neo-paganism or evangelical Christianity or Islam or anything, but they very much buy into some sort of organized religion as well. Then when I was going to high school, I was actually going to a Catholic high school in Utah, and the only reason is because, unfortunately, the Catholic high schools have the best education system in Utah, which is sad enough on its own. And a few years later, I moved to Washington State, and I thought I had escaped from some of the creatards, only to find that we have the Discovery Institute in Seattle, Washington. And this past quarter at my college, the Christians on Campus Club invited a local creationist to come and give a lecture. And, of course, pretty much his lecture is, this is what is wrong with evolution. This is what they're not telling you, basically kind of hinting at the evolution conspiracy of things they're not telling you, but I'm going to reveal the truth to you. And sitting through this lecture, I had to stop myself from facepalming before I got a permanent imprint of my hand through my head.
Sure. Well, sure. You know, even someone like Stephen Hawking publishes something in the scientific, and he is revered by the scientific community, but watch people go letter by letter, punctuation by punctuation through his published position and dissect it, and they are ready to, I mean, the skeptical community takes pride in vetting whether they're right or wrong, they're not going to roll over and just say, well, Hawking said it, so it's got to be true. There are people all across the planet who are experts in their field who are going to put his proverbial feet to the fire. So the idea that they're all in cahoots together to sell the lie of evolution, to kill God, is just laughable to the extreme. And it's probably one of the ultimate conspiracy theories. That's a great point. Thanks for the call. I much appreciate it. Anything else?
That's pretty much all I had. Keep up the good work, man.
Very kind of you. Thank you very, very much. I've got time for one more. 207, thanks for your patience. You're on the Thinking Atheist Radio podcast. Who's this?
Hey, this is Carson up here in Maine. How you doing, Seth?
I'm doing well. Thanks for calling the show. Talk to me. Conspiracy theories.
I'm going to go, I'll be a little sidetracked here, but back in 1979, as it was turning 1980, New Year's Eve, I worked for Cumberland Farms back when I had eyesight. I'm blind now, but I was working 50 hours a week, and I was 18 years old, and when I wasn't working, I was doing a lot of partying. So some guy came in and told me that, you know, the world is going to end at midnight. And I went home to see my father afterwards, and you know, when you work that much and you drink that much, and you know, and you're 18 years old, you buy into quite a bit of stuff. So I went home to my father, and people had been telling me that this lady's a witch and that one's it. And I tell my father this stuff, and he says, "You know what?" He says, "Can you predict what's going to happen? Do you know what's going to happen tomorrow?" I said, "Well, no." And he says, "Can you do spells and make things happen and, you know, change things?" And I said, "No." He says, "You're just like everybody else. And what you met was a Seventh-day Adventist. They've been saying that the world's going to end since 1840. And one of the other things, you know, so that was what made me think that all this stuff is really, really bullshit, you know. And you go down the store aisles and you see the smut rags, and you know that somebody's making a lot of money now on these things and having people believe it. Now, I'm going to make a correlation here. The correlation to religion is that faith is believing something by no evidence. You're just supposed to believe it. So look at advertisement in America. You got guys selling, well, this aspirin here works pretty, this works great, you know, and you have the snake oil salesman in the white coats, and, you know, and it says doctors will tell you that this is the best aspirin, and they're not telling you these are all veterinarians, and, you know, like there's one shred of evidence there. So, and this is probably a conspiracy theory in itself, probably sort of along what the last guy said, you know, that we have one grain of truth, and there's an advantageous piece to this, to those that are selling the bullshit, that are making the money to keep people believing all these different things.
Well, sure, you do what is it that many of the people like who are selling what they call woo, and we're going to do a whole show, by the way, on woo. We're talking about Deepak Chopra and people like that who they take highly credible sounding terms and truths or half-truths, and then they wrap their story around in it to give it credibility. You know, we're going to talk a lot about that. But, you know, it's like the whole Mayan calendar thing. What's the end of the world supposed to be this year? Is it December? Is it like the 21st, I think, that the whole world? How many end of the world predictions have there been? You know, remember I remember back when the Y2K happened, the Millennium Bug was supposed to crash computers all across the planet, right? And I was still religious relatively at the time, and there were people in Christian circles who were publishing books about how this is a sign of the end times. Well, hell, they've been talking about the end times for decades. Meanwhile, Christ in the Bible said that there were many among him who would not see death. So he's at least 2,000 years late on this whole end of the world thing.
Don't you wish that Harold cared that you gone up to him and said, look, you know the world's going to end, so just sign this quit claim deed here to your bank account to me, and you know, seeing as you're not going to need it anymore, then maybe you ought to just sign all your money over to me.
I had people assert that we should do that. I had people say, just go up to one of those Harold Camping followers and say, look, sign over your car. Give me the day after the predicted day of the end of the world. Let me have your house, your car, your property, your stocks, your bonds, your bank accounts, all your equity, everything you own. Show me how much of a believer you are. And nobody did it. Nobody.
Down the gym, my friend Matt, I said we were talking about this and all the BS that's out there that's with everything, right? And I said, you know what's going to happen on the day that the world's supposedly going to end? And he says, yeah, the next month's bills are going to come in.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Well, I'll tell you the thing that bothers me. It's not even that sometimes it's kind of fun. Hey, the Mayans said the world's going to end. You know, let's have a party. We're just doing it kind of tongue-in-cheek. I mean, Natalie's daughter came home. This was back when Harold Camping's prediction was supposedly going to take place, and I had done a couple of videos on this. And she was talking about it with her schoolmates. Now, she's, at the time, 13 years old. She's an impressionable kid who hears people talking that the world is going to end. And she was not freaked, but, I mean, she was genuinely
upset,
scared.
Right?
Yeah, she was scared. Mom, is the world really going to end on this day? I am sorry. These people are damaging. You know, they're a problem, and they have to be exposed.
Do you realize there's somebody at NASA that has an email address that his job is to write to kids that are scared because of this, and tell them that the scientists are looking into the cosmos and there's nothing going to happen.
Wow.
And thankfully that guy's there writing that kind of stuff, you know, to people and trying to straighten them out. This stuff damages people.
Well, I was glad I was in the house. I mean, I was glad I was within earshot because I was able to say, look, don't listen to these people. I was able to say the words, you know, this is the least credible person on, you know, this guy's even below Deepak on the credibility scale, which is saying something.
On the other side of the coin, I know people that are very bright. that one lady was telling me that she's very bright, that the trails that come out of jets were like the government seeding the air, and I just, you know, the stare that you talk about when you talk to a religious guy that, you know, you're trying to talk sense. Well, that's the stare that kind of happens to me when somebody starts telling me that jet streams are seeding poisons into the air. I
mentioned that at the beginning of the show, that the government is actually, spraying mind control chemicals on the population through the chemtrails of jet planes. I mean, you know, these people are driving down the street, right? They're on their way to work, and a 737 flies overhead, and they are, you know, they're sitting there breathing through a wet hanky. Hey, you're a great call. I have got to move on, my friend, but thanks for a terrific addition to the show. All my best to you.
Hey, thank you for everything you do, Seth. You were the greatest thing I think I've found on YouTube.
You're very
thank
kind.
you very much.
Thank you, man. Take care of yourself. You call back anytime, okay? What
Take
a
care,
great
man.
voice he's got, too. Man, he should be on all the time. Sometimes people call in, and I just think, wow, they're just great at communication. And I was watching the chat room, and everybody's really enjoying the kind of the tenor and tempo of his voice. And as we talk about conspiracies, I found myself smiling. Thanks for the last 90 minutes as we covered just probably a dip in the ocean, a little toe in the ocean here as far as how many conspiracy theories are out there. And I think it's important. You know, Michael Shermer's right. We should always keep our eyes and ears open. Don't take it for granted. And again, skeptic.com if you want to check into some tools that might help you vet the information that comes your way. Thanks again for a great, great week. I'll see you next time on the Thinking Atheist Radio Podcast.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.